Cadillac, simply the best. And I'm so excited to have with me today Mark Yonkman, who is an author of a new book titled Reclaim Rural Vote and Win in 2024, a Democratic Operative's Handbook. And so that's who I have with me today. How you doing, Mark?
Good, thank you, Rose.
Good.
I appreciate being here.
Yeah, well, we're really excited. I think it is so cool that we have so many authors in and around Northern Michigan. Last weekend, we were at an event the library put on in downtown Cadillac that had over 30 authors there. And we're lucky enough to have an author today who wrote this nonfiction book regarding this year's presidential race. And the first thing I always like to do is to jump right into it. Mark, would you kind of tell us a little bit about your book and really why did you write this book and what's it about?
Sure. Thank you, Rose. I'm a sixth generation Michigander. My ancestors came over from the Netherlands in the 1870s, and part of them settled in Boon, Michigan, which is just, I guess, north and west of here.
Mhm.
And I grew up on a family farm, a very traditional legacy family farm. We had a hand pump and an outhouse early on in my life, which we then upgraded to in indoor plumbing. But we had chickens and pigs and cows. Just the
Awesome.
very traditional homesteaded kind of life. And I then, like many people from the farm, went to college and then on to law school and ended up working first in Detroit. I was general counsel of Comerica Bank, which a lot of people here are familiar with.
Absolutely.
And when they moved the headquarters to Texas, I was recruited by the largest retail bank in New York, M&T Bank, and I was general counsel there for the rest of that career. And while I was in Detroit, I ended up, through sort of happenstance, adopting two daughters,
Oh,
and you know one of
I
them.
know her, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And both of whom are Black, and one was from foster care in the city of Detroit. The other one is from inner city Kalamazoo, and she's mixed. So I have a Black daughter and a mixed daughter, which is its own set of issues.
Mm.
In any event, right before COVID, my parents passed away, and I ended up buying part of the family farm, and we moved back to Michigan to settle the estate. And then COVID hit, and we stayed on the farm because it was a nice place to be during COVID, and we were practicing 6 mile distancing, so we didn't have the same risk
Right.
as other people. So it was really a nice place to be, and I really just loved being back. I know a lot of people, and I fit in well, and my neighbors are great. My view is that rural America, especially here, has moved so far to the middle from where it used to be, and it's just very, very comfortable living here. And the other thing I noticed is how misunderstood rural America is, and how rural America is so often painted with these urban tropes, which aren't true, but people often in urban settings have a view of rural Americans, and they say this is how they all are. It's just not true.
So let me just catch up a little. I think that you're bringing up some really interesting facts about Northern Michigan and rural America. I think that it's really interesting that you decided to, after being in Detroit and being in New York, but growing up in Northern Michigan, you found that it was nice to be back home
Yes,
and be on the farm and raise your children or be with your children
right,
in the same environment that you grew up.
right.
And I can imagine having kids in general is challenging, but being a single dad and having, you know, mixed race
Yes,
family, that can present a lot of different challenges that only you can probably understand and
mhm,
express and explain. So you have a very cool and unique perspective. You have the urban perspective, you have the rural perspective. You also have that legal mind that is really relevant in the area. A lot of political issues revolve around law.
yes,
And so I see that with your legal background, you probably, and I've heard this so many times, as my daughter's a lawyer, that once a lawyer, you always think like a lawyer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so
Which is good and bad.
that's right. So I think you bring a really important perspective to this whole topic of the differences between urban life and urban opinion and rural opinion. And it's easy to see where people might be a little bit myopic and not really look at it from a holistic point of view, if
Right.
you will. And so I'm very excited to hear what the theme and thesis of your thoughts are regarding your book.
Sure. So when I first began thinking of doing something, it was really with a mind towards bringing urban and rural back together. And it was very clear to me that we used to be more on the same page because we had this huge rural to urban migration. So no matter where you were in urban America, there was always a farmer on your staff or somebody who was in World War II or the Korean War. Without trying, you had this natural built-in diversity of voices, and it was very effective. But I was the last one of that generation who made that sort of transition, and those people are all now gone. So when you go to any sort of urban professional universities, political staffs,
Mm.
there is no one with a farm or rural or even sometimes no military background at all. And without realizing it, especially on the Democratic staffs, they've become very non-diverse because they don't have that diversity of voices anymore. And
Interesting.
I'll give you an example of something that
Interesting.
that just happened. I was at a legislative affairs update in the state of Michigan, and Congresswoman was trying to usher through a right to repair piece of legislation for farmers, which is very important to us because if your equipment breaks down in the field and you have to put it on a flatbed, tow it to John Deere and have them repair it, and they're closed on the weekend. I mean, you can lose a week of production, and you only have 12 weeks in the summer.
Right.
So it's a big deal.
That's serious.
And so I was very supportive of this, and she was terrific. And the opposition is very, very normal on John Deere, obviously. And then Apple and Tesla don't want it because they think if farmers get it, it's going to get pushed down to their products,
Ah,
and they don't want that. So they're opposing it not because of farmers, but because of the state. So that sounds like politics.
right.
That didn't surprise me. But I then, in the discussion, I asked her about the military aspect of this because the other thing that farmers talk about is if we ever have any sort of war um, and disruption, which could be it could also be famine, it could be whatever. But if John Deere gets disrupted, how are we going to fix our equipment during the war?
Mm.
Right? And we're going to
Right.
we don't want all of the machinery just sitting in the field because
Right.
John Deere was blown.
Right.
And her response was, "Oh my God, that's
Mm.
a great. I didn't think of that. That's a
Mhm.
great. We can use that in our trying to get this passed."
Sure.
And my reaction was that back in the day, there would have been a farmer or a military guy on her staff, right? That she would have known this.
Right.
This isn't because I'm extra smart or anything. This is just because I grew up in a military family and I live on a farm and I hear people talk about this sort of thing all the time.
Right.
And my neighbor just got back from Afghanistan. He's very concerned about this,
Right.
right? So that farm, rural, military voice is really important.
Really,
Right?
truly important. Well, thank goodness. We've got some perspectives. You know, thing about urbanization that's happening. It's really happening worldwide.
It is.
It really
It
is. I was reading a statistic just about, China. They say 25 million people a year are moving to their East Coast, which is Shanghai and all of those.
Yes.
So there's no end in sight to this
Right.
urbanization. And so, but there'll still be many people out there in the rural America or in rural country, any country, that will definitely need to have their voice heard across all political lines.
Yes.
So, understanding rural America, how will you um, reach the Democratic people that are really the ones that would be influencing policy and encouraging more engagement, if you will.
Right. But, right, which is, open right to the page. So
Yay.
we can hold this up to the camera if you'd like,
Yes.
but
Let's do it.
why don't you do that? And
David, can you help me with this?
see,
Okay.
this chart is a chart of the what I would call underrepresented or sort of traditional uh, legacy groups that we talk about.
Right.
And you've got Arab voters, which is less than 1%,
Mhm.
LGBTQ, which is 5%,
True.
or could be more or less, but Hispanic is 9%, Black is 12%,
Mhm.
youth is 16%, but they vote at less than half the rate as everyone else. So it's
Really?
really 8%.
Okay.
And then you've got 25%.
Amazing.
All of these groups are represented by 501c3s, nonprofits, right?
Right.
There are
So the young
political
voters,
action,
the
yes.
black voters,
Lots of
Hispanic,
money is there, right?
right?
You, right.
LGBTQ.
If you want to get money for a gay PAC, easy. A black
Mhm.
PAC, easy. Youth
Mhm.
PAC, easy. A youth charity, easy. But if you try to get money for
Rural.
rural rednecks,
Right.
I'm, which is me.
Right.
I'm saying that in a,
Tongue in cheek.
well, no, I mean,
No,
how,
in a real
that's
way.
in a real way. I mean,
Yeah.
I live on a farm, and I'm
Right.
sort of a redneck,
Mhm.
and my neighbors view me as one too. But when you try to get money for rural white farmers or who are not part of big ag or whatever, there's no money. If you're part of big ag, you can get lots of money.
Mhm.
But this rural voters are not big ag, and
Mhm.
I don't know if everyone really understands that, but a lot of us who are legacy family farmers, we're the ones who saw the family farm decline.
Right.
We were told to either get big or get out. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I
Earl
do
Butts.
remember
Yes.
that. Yes.
And it was a concerted effort to get rid of the family farm because we
Right.
wanted large corporate factory farms.
Mhm.
The small farmer didn't.
No.
This was an urban push on the small farmer. So a lot of us refer to the USDA as USDA King
Mm.
because it represents factory farmers
Factory
and
farmers.
the big guys. They get all the money, right? A lot of it
Mhm.
goes to soybean and corn sales overseas. And it wasn't until people finally began wanting organic food that the small farmer could come back. Because organic
Right.
is perfect for the small farmer. And it is how we farmed until 1960. I mean, well, we didn't have pesticides. We didn't have herbicides. We didn't have, I grew up farming 100% organic, and then we were told not to.
Hmm.
So a great example of poor messaging is there's money in the current infrastructure bill for organic farming, which is great. And USDA came out with a statement that, hallelujah, we are going to teach farmers how to farm organic.
Okay.
And that went over so poorly
Hmm.
because those of us who did farm organic until you told us not to,
Mhm.
you're now coming in and solving the problem, telling us that you're going to teach us how to farm organic. And there is a lot of new organic stuff. I'm trying to do no-till, no-kill farming.
Okay.
There's lots of really good stuff out there. But I would have said, if I were doing this, not changing what they're doing, but I would have said, for farmers who are going to return to organic farming, we have a lot of new things to push out to you. That's just a better, more positive way of saying it without digging. You're picking at an old scab.
Right.
Right.
They need
And
to be more helpful and positive.
they need to
messaging.
be right, and they need to, so in defense of USDA, this is probably some 25-year-old who drafted this, right?
Right.
They have no idea
No
that we
clue.
were no clue, right?
Right.
In their defense, but there needs to be more attention on those kind of messaging issues because you're offending people unnecessarily, even when you're doing something good,
Right.
right?
That's exactly true.
So let's not make those kinds of mistakes.
Mhm. I hear you. I hear you. So, well, let's keep moving. Democrats, well, how is the Democrat Party historically engaged then? And what's their history in engaging rural community versus what they're doing today? Have they, in the past, was there more engagement?
I would go back to my prior point. Let me start with what they're doing today,
Yeah.
which is nothing.
Oh dear.
And there is no. If you look at the White House, there is no office of rural engagement.
Hmm.
So in this chart of all these groups, there is an office for the Arab vote, for the LGBTQ vote, for Hispanic vote, for Black vote, right, youth vote, they have dedicated staff.
But they're the lowest percentages.
And exactly. When you
So
look
you-
at the chart, they're the lowest percentages.
So
And
again,
there's
let's-
no one here.
Just so you get this, people, rural voters are 25%. They're the largest group. Young voters 16, which is really 8 because they're not that engaged at that age. Black voters 12%, Hispanic 9%, LGBTQ 5%, or a little bit more possibly, and Arab voters are less than 1%. So we're focusing on these different groups and we're ignoring the group that really could really be leveraged. We need to learn how to communicate more effectively and really support the rural America more.
And it's actually 100% worse than this
How
because
so?
because take what's happening now with the Arab vote and some of the youth vote, which sometimes that's linked to the Palestinian issue. When
Oh, I see
you
what you mean.
when
Yes.
you lose an Arab vote, they're not going to vote for Trump. They're just not going to show up, right?
Uh-huh.
So you lose one vote. Okay. But rural voters, we vote, especially in Michigan, we vote at a higher rate than urban voters of any kind.
The
So
voters are going to show up. is
the
what you're
voters
saying.
are going to show up.
So-
So if you lose a rural voter, you're losing a vote and
They're gaining.
they're gaining a
In
vote. So
the-
it's
in the
2
vote.
votes, right?
Right.
So it's 2 for 1 when you're talking about rural versus Arab or young voters. It's 2 for 1.
Interesting.
And I don't know that a lot of politicians have focused on that yet. And it's very important.
Wow. I just
Right.
don't you just
So-
love the way Mark's brain works? So intelligent. That's a subtlety that I certainly wouldn't have realized, and that's a significant and important point.
And
So-
a lot of people have.
That's very interesting, and I do understand because voting is a part of the fabric of America, and these people are really the backbone of the United States. So, tell me what some of the challenges and obstacles are that you have while you've been messaging and getting the word out. What kind of challenges
Well,
and obstacles
yes.
are you running into?
The obstacles are all within the party itself. There aren't obstacles on the outside. There aren't obstacles among rural voters. When I speak to any rural voters, everybody is on this page. We all feel ignored. We all feel not listened to.
Mhm.
They're not looking for our input.
Mm.
They will often talk about things that they have given us, and they've given us things like rural broadband, which is important.
Yeah.
Right, that was very important. But it comes across as, we paid for your vote, why aren't you voting for us?
Mm.
Because it's things, it's not concepts or ideals. Right,
Right.
right. And it's very difficult to get through to a machine that is, by all accounts, and these are other people's words, very calcified around going after the LGBTQ, the
Mhm.
youth vote, the Black vote. Those are really important, and that's what they're focused on. And if you
Right.
read the paper, that's what they talk about. They talk about these
Right.
little percentage groups,
Right.
and if we could just get 100% of all these little groups to vote for us, we will win. Well, that's probably true. That's not how it works.
Right.
And in this rural vote, which again, it's double what I'm even making it out to be, because they are going to vote.
Mhm.
I think there is a lot of low hanging fruit there that we're not getting because we're not talking to them.
Right.
And there's also within this group, I don't know if you've ever heard of a revenge vote.
What is a revenge?
So a revenge vote is where you have so dismissed me in my view. Screw it, I'll vote for Trump just to piss you off.
Right.
That's a
right.
revenge vote.
That's a revenge vote.
That's a revenge vote,
Yeah.
yes.
If you completely
So-
ignore someone.
Or if you project onto them something that they don't think they are. Let me give you an example.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great.
So at an event where they had a Democratic operative from Detroit come up, and he was supposed to talk about how to talk to Trump voters, which I thought that's a very odd person. I mean, I can talk to anyone, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't understand that in small communities, we have 250 households in Boone.
Okay.
You have to get along with everyone.
Right.
There is no, I can't like this group of people. It's all your people,
Right.
right? So
Right.
everybody gets along with everyone. Everybody just,
And it is a great little.
and it's a great little,
I love
right?
them.
So this guy said, from Detroit, he said, well, in upper Michigan, everybody is afraid that all the black and brown people are going to take your jobs. And we all, like, I've never heard that. I've never heard that from, and really, you think that black people are going up to the UP to steal people's jobs? And the woman sitting next to me was from the UP, and she said, we would love to have a black person in the UP.
Right. Exactly. It's so
but
out of touch.
It was just
Really out of
it
touch.
was just so out of touch. And then he sort of went on and on and on. And I had that feeling like I'm going to vote for Trump just because you're,
Yes, you're so
you,
disconnected to what's real
I wouldn't
here.
do that, but
Well,
I understand what a revenge vote is.
And I
Yes.
just have to say that getting back to the whole reason for this particular podcast is that we have a voice in North Michigan, and we need to project our voice no matter what. And so this podcast and those like it in Northern Michigan need to be more. Hopefully, this particular broadcast will reach some of the folks in the different parts of the communities in the more urban places so that they get a little bit more of a feel for what's happening in rural America, because we do have a voice and we do have our own opinions, and they the whatever book they're reading, it's not accurate.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's difficult because I don't think that this is a bottom up issue. This particular issue is top down.
I hear you there. I
Right.
completely. Can
It's
you elaborate
top.
on that a little bit?
Well, from the bottom up. Everyone I talk to in rural America is on the same page. Anything that I say in here resonates with them. I've had a lot of people read the book, and on the rural side, everybody is yes, you've spot on. This is pretty much how we think. You've got, this is fairly very little disagreement on points. And yes, we do feel disrespected, and we're certainly ignored. And you see that in spades. But they can't do anything. The rural voters I talk to, because again, there is no money to go after, right? So they have no voice. There is no one in Washington saying, for example, hey, on the right to repair, what about this?
Yes.
That's a rural voice, and there's no one with that voice.
Right.
Even Big Ag, Big Ag wouldn't say that because they represent John Deere.
Right. So what would be, so we've got the book to get the message out. What other solutions are you suggesting for this situation?
Well, a couple of things. One is to get this message out. I think the message on the 2-for-1 issue that I'm trying to get that out in spades to the Democratic Party, primarily the Biden campaign, Washington, and then the 8 states that we're talking about, because these are the swing states.
And what are those 8 states? Could you list them for us?
Sure. So the 8 swing states are on the cover of the book. There's a little map. And the states in blue are the states that were opened up after the Civil War. They're the states west of the Appalachians.
Right.
And they were kept, they tried not to have homesteading in those states until the issue of slavery was resolved. That was a big deal for Thomas Jefferson and others.
Oh, the thing, I'm going to stop you for a minute, Mark. I really, really appreciate this little bit of a dive into the history of these 8 states, because it really, what I learned is that the history of these states and when they were settled by the pioneers, and even up until this very day, those were they influence what's happening even today. And so one of the things I would love it, Mark, if you would take us through, even though it is a bit of a history class, I would love for you to explain to our listeners your take on the people that settled these areas, whether it's Michigan, Wisconsin, it's Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana,
West-
Ohio, and Western
Western
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, yes.
So those are the areas that we're talking about. So could you give us that deep dive
Sure.
into the pioneers and even up to this day?
Sure. So let's back up just for a second. In a sort of 50,000 foot level, we really have four major areas that are considered rural in the US. And the coastal elites lump rural all together in one bucket. They say rural, this is what it is. But you really have four very different areas. You have Yankee, I call it Yankee rural, which is the East Coast. Those were settled with 10-acre parcels because that was enough to feed a family. And everybody back then was a farmer. Right? So
Right.
you had homesteads with 10 acres. Then you had the rural South. That was based on slavery.
Right.
And the legacy of slavery is still there. And then you have the rural upper Midwest, which was settled, and I'll get more into this in a second, after slavery and was almost all by Northern Europeans.
Right.
And I'll get into the reasons why that did happen. And then you have Western rural, which is itself you can divide into probably four different groups, but that was the ranches, bigger homesteads because they were ranching cattle, right? Cattle people and
Makes sense.
right. And then you've got the Pacific Northwest but so that's a separate group. So when you look at a statistic of rural Americans, it'll often be a terrible statistic, but that's because the South and the West drag down the North.
Okay.
So if you look at voting participation rates, who votes more, an urban person or a rural person? A national statistic says urban votes higher at a higher rate than rural, which is true. You lump them all
Okay.
together. But that's because the rural South, rural West are terrible at it.
So they don't go to the polls.
They don't go to the polls. But if you look at, think about it, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all these dairy farmers and Northern Europeans, in my family, which is Dutch, it was a moral obligation to vote.
Right.
So
Wow.
we vote far more than urban Michiganders. So if you're looking at the wrong statistic, you get misled and you think, oh, blah, blah, blah. The same thing on like racial divisions and others. You look at there's a book out right now, another book out where they're talking about how, in a lot of respects, how terrible a lot of these rural people are. All of their examples are rural South.
Mm.
Well, that's not, you're painting the whole country with a very specific group that just doesn't apply everywhere.
Right. Right.
So you really have to parse these out. And
I follow you completely. It's
Right.
a totally different demographic when
Totally
you look
different.
at these different parts of the United States. And we really do pride ourselves in such diversity. And I love the way
We
that
do.
you have identified this particular group as, they have similar traits in this particular part of the United States. And they sound like they are really conscientious about going to the polls.
They are, right. So what happened in the upper Midwest is slavery ended. And right after that ended, there was a big boom. So that's when we had the robber barons, the railroads, the
Right.
Vanderbilts, the US just exploded.
Right.
Its
And
economy
if you look
exploded.
at
Right.
Cadillac, we started in what, 1872?
That's
was
exactly
when
right.
Cadillac
Right.
became a town in 1872, and that's the time frame you're talking about.
Yes. So the railroads wanted to push from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Correct.
And so they built, the Ohio and whatever. I don't know the names of the railroads anymore, but
Right, I know.
but they came through this whole area and
And
the
they had the
railroads.
Erie Canal built.
Yes. The railroads wanted farms on either side of the railroad,
Okay.
right? Both for economic reasons. They wanted to, the produce and everything was going to be sold, and transported by railroad, but also to protect from Indians. So what the railroads did is they opened offices all through Northern Europe. They said, well, where are the countries that are most suited and hardest working for climate? Swedes, the Norwegians, Finns, Dutch, Germans, Belgians, and English. So they actually opened offices over there and solicited people.
That's amazing to me that the railroads recruited people from these countries in Northern Europe to come to the United States.
Yes.
And
So
that is an amazing historical fact that I don't think a lot of people know this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people wonder sometimes, why is there all of a sudden this enclave of Danes up in, Minnesota? How did that happen? Well,
I know.
because of the railroads.
When I lived in Minnesota, I lived in Rochester for 6 months, and there were a lot of, I remember it was very Lutheran, so does that mean they were from Germany?
Yes, they'd be from Germany,
Yeah,
right?
there are
So
a lot of
right,
Lutherans in and around
right.
Rochester, Minnesota, and and I always wondered that, so
Yeah.
that's why.
So that's how they were solicited. I mean, in this, and you can still you can look up the solicitation. They didn't mention the Indians. They, the railroads, right? Because
Oh,
they're trying to
They
get
didn't
people.
want to give them the bad news.
No, they didn't get the bad news. And in all of it, slavery has been completely resolved.
By then,
Well, that's what
they thought.
that's what they thought, right?
Yeah.
That we've never had to talk about
It's
that.
over.
Yeah, it's over, right? So people came here thinking, okay, slavery is resolved, and I can buy an 80 acre parcel. I think it was $1 an acre, so for $80. It wasn't completely free, but it was pretty close.
Yes.
And all you had to do is come with your little kit of tools and take your family and start a homestead. And
Right.
that's why all these properties are 80 acres.
And that's why my mom would always say, well, we're going to the back 40.
The back 40, right?
The back 40 and
Right.
the front 40.
Right.
And because it added to 80.
Correct.
I never knew that before. But
And right.
Mom would talk about the farm.
And a family can't really farm without tractors. When you just have horses, my dad was the last generation to farm with a horse. You can't farm more than 40 acres with a family. That's why there was always a back 40.
Okay.
Because when you came here, you got 80 acres, but there were trees on it.
Yeah.
Right. And you
Yeah,
had to
you had to
clear
clear
this
it.
with a horse
Wow.
and an axe.
Wow.
I mean, it's not. This wasn't. It's
That's
incredible
not for
the
the
work.
faint of heart.
So normally you would have your front 40 that you had cleared. You pick not the front 40, the best 40. Right, the flattest, the most fertile, and that that's a bit of luck of the draw.
Mhm.
There are some people who got terrible land, and other people who got the jackpot. But you would probably farm 40 acres, and then you had the back 40, right, which is the first 40 that you sold. People started needing money, but that was those were 80 acre parcels.
My mom and dad's back 40 ended up being right in the middle of 131 down by Tustin.
Right. Right.
Anyway, keep going.
Right. So you ended up with a culture in the upper Midwest that is completely different from South. These were Lutherans and very, first of all, very common, consistent personality. Dutch, German, Swedish. I'm Dutch, but I'm Dutch. I think Norwegian and Austrian. So just that complete demographic, according to DNA testing, and Viking.
Viking.
Yes,
Whoa.
and my mother always said she was Irish, but it comes up Viking. It does, yeah.
I
But-
love that.
But in any event, that's a personality, and you know what I'm talking about if you live here. You know the Dutch farmer and the German farmer.
Oh
and
yeah,
right.
absolutely. Love
And you've seen it in
everyone.
Minnesota, and
Yes.
yes, well, that personality is still lingering. It's still there, and I in the book I say I tell political operatives, if you're talking about the rural South, say rural South, because if you don't, you end up stepping on their upper Midwest toes. Because I hear this all the time. They'll say, well, rural people X, Y, and Z, and we're all like,
That's not us.
that's not us. That's not
Right.
going to happen, right? And a great example of that is, both my kids who are Black, and I've had a lot of Black friends up here. I have never heard the N-word in rural Michigan, ever.
No.
I can't imagine someone saying that
No.
to anyone, right?
No.
But all of them have been called the N-word, urban America, right?
Yes.
That's so. It happens, but it's
to,
all urban America. It's not
respect for the individual.
correct. Here, people are way more polite and respectful to say something like that. And Black friends who have been up here will say all the time, why is it not racist here? Why does it seem so not racist? Like, where's, they'll say, where's the race? I was expecting
more.
I was going to be hiding behind the door, and and I'm like, because I'm not saying that there isn't racism here, but it's not the racism that you see in urban centers, and it's certainly not the racism that is projected onto rural people. And I would say, who is more racist? For sure, urban areas. And I've lived in urban areas, far more racist, and for lots of reasons. And so, yeah, my friends say the same thing, that I, it's not what I thought it would be.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, that's good
So,
to hear.
and that's good about
That's really
us.
good to
Right?
hear.
It's good about us.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. It's really cool.
Right.
I'm very proud of my neighbors. So as we continue through this, I've really been enjoying this conversation. So what are the success stories and examples that you could talk about that some of the initiatives, you say something about Dirt Road Revival?
Yeah.
What
So
is that
there's a
about?
politician in Maine, Chloe Mack, and she was a 22-year-old, not a farmer, but just she was actually a sort of an environmental activist originally.
Mhm.
But she decided to run for office in rural.
Okay.
And to do that, she doesn't seem like the right person for this, but she really was the right person for this, because what she did was she knew that she had to talk to rural voters, and particularly rural voters who were Republican. And the Democratic Party, there's a piece of software that they have. They can identify like where the probable Democratic leaning people live, and then you can go knock on their door and talk to them. And she understood, well, those aren't the people I need to talk to. Those are probably going to vote for any, right?
Ah,
I mean, why am I going to go talk to a Democratic household?
right.
I need to get the Republicans. And people push back on her for having that attitude. And I've seen that attitude here as well. People will say, I need to, you need to talk to the Democratic voters, but that's a turnout issue. That's
Right.
not a converting your vote issue, right?
Right.
You go talk to an existing Democratic voter, you're trying to get them to come out and vote.
Right. And vote.
She realized, no, I have to go talk to the people who don't want to vote for me and convince them that they should.
Uh-huh.
And
That
so
makes sense.
she did. She went out and talked to people. And she said, generally, when you talk to people, they're thrilled you're talking to them.
Mhm. They like the attention.
They like the attention. And you don't go in there with Democrat on your sleeve. You go in there talking about, I'm Chloe, who are you?
Right.
And what are your concerns? Versus, I'm a Democrat, vote for
Yeah.
Democrats.
She was listening.
She was listening.
Yeah.
Right. I need
So
to listen. And
wanted
she
to-
won.
And she won.
And she was the only red district that year in the US.
And
So
she called it the Dirt Road Revival.
it's called Dirt Road. She wrote a book about it. It's a great book. And it's
Okay.
all about, it's everything that I'm saying in a different way. Hers is
Right.
from the campaign trail.
Right.
But
From
it's
her
exactly
perspective.
from her perspective. And it worked.
Yeah. What a success story.
Yeah. So we know it can work.
Yeah.
And
Have you ever considered running for office?
no,
No.
but a lot of people say that. And, that's in Boone, a lot of people ask me that, because when you're in a small community, there just aren't that many people. So they want you to do stuff.
Right.
And they have no idea if I'm a Democrat or Republican or what, because they don't care. That's not,
They just like your ideas.
yeah,
And
you either speak rural or you don't, right? And if you speak rural, then people
it's
don't
not
care.
your fatigue to be in a political.
Well, I don't, I guess it
contender.
would depend on what would be what I'm doing right now, what is the best and highest use of what I'm trying to accomplish here? Where should that be in the political system? And, I'm trying to be effective there. Part of when you run for office, what office would that be? And are you really passionate about it? Because if you're going to win, you should be really passionate about it. That should be really important to you. So I'm just not sure that is where I would. I might run for some maybe lower office just to like give back to the community.
Oh. Okay.
Not to. But there are other things like green commissioner and board of supervisors, and they've asked me to be a trustee on the township board.
Okay.
Which
Well, I can see that. I mean,
maybe
you've
I
got
will, maybe I won't. But
very, very
yeah.
interesting insights.
Yeah.
And so I would like to ask you, what would you say a call to action would be if you wanted someone to, what would be your call to action?
So that's the tough one,
Yeah.
right? Because the call to action, I can't do a call to action from grassroots level because I think they're already all on this page. I don't think there's anyone who would really disagree with what I'm trying to do here. The call of action is at the upper level, and it's to change your mindset. I think we need to change probably three things. One is remind yourself that you're talking about a 2-to-1 vote. That's really important.
Right.
And when you hear people say, which they do, that there just aren't enough votes here to really mind, and it's much more effective for us to open an office on a campus because I can hit all these young people,
Right.
right? They think that's a better spend. Remember, those people don't vote.
Mhm.
And if you lose their vote, it's only one. And if you start talking to rural voters, not only is it 2-to-1, but these people, it's a much larger group.
Mhm.
You know, it's by what, 4 times what the youth vote is.
Right.
So that's one. Two, think about who on your staff is your rural guru on everybody's staff. You know, to rebuild what we used to have, where you just organically got a farmer without trying. You know, it's like when you hire somebody and they're really productive because they're also a plumber and an electrician, and they're a veterinarian, and all of a sudden they're like super useful to your organization, right? That's what these people used to be. They used to also be, you know, maybe I'm a political expert, but I'm also a farmer, also a vet.
Yeah.
So when these issues come up, I'm already giving you advice. You have to recreate that now. You need to have somebody on your staff who's thoughtful about
That
these
speaks that
issues, who speaks that language.
Right.
You don't need just an Arab vote specialist or a youth vote specialist. Who is your rural vote specialist? And if you can't identify that person, there's your problem.
There's a lack.
There's your problem.
And
Right, right. So those are two. And then the third is at least be present and talk to rural voters. I'll give you an example of
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. We just had 10 days of early voting in Michigan for the primary in February, remember?
Yes.
And so my daughter ran that.
Yes, I remember.
Yes,
Yeah.
her clerk duties. So, and I wandered into the voting places from time to time just to see what people are talking about. I'm very curious about this. And if you recall at that time, all Democrats were talking about was the Arab vote and losing the Arab vote. Youth voters are turning away because of Palestine.
Oh, because of the
right. And
event.
which these are important issues. But the sense was that I got, it was, okay, yeah, Democrats are very concerned about this less than 1% group, but they're not talking, they don't even mention rural voters, like they don't even care. And the way I view that is, it's like two kids. When one kid is getting all the attention,
Yes.
you have to do something special for the other kid.
That's right.
You can't just ignore them.
Right.
So what I would have done during that 10-day period is I would have had Pete Buttigieg from Traverse City talk to us.
Right.
Just say, you guys are really important to us.
That's a good point.
You don't even have to talk about policy. You don't have to talk about transportation. Just, I'm from Traverse City and I like you guys.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do. This is free stuff.
Engage.
Right. Engage them. Right. And show up. Right.
Very important.
Very important.
Wow.
And they're not doing that.
Yes. Well, those are very important.
These are easy things, right?
Pretty easy things to do. And so, Mark, how can they get a hold of you if someone needs to reach out to you, want a copy of your book?
Sure.
Do you have a website? Or an email? Are you open to
I am.
people
connecting
absolutely. With you?
Absolutely. Because this is a dialogue. Yeah. Right. So my
share
website
this.
is just my name, markyonkman.com. So MARK, Yonkman is YONKMA.com.
Nice Dutch name.
Nice Dutch name, right? And my phone number is on my book as well. So and my email is on my email is just mark@markyonkman.com. And anybody who would like to call.
And how do they get a copy of your book?
So the book is available on either Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
And there's a paperback and a hardcover version. The Barnes and Noble hardcover version is prettier and nicer.
It's beautiful. I really love the cover. I think it's a beautiful book. And I have to tell you,
those are real cows, and they are real cows on my property.
Isn't it beautiful? And the thing I love about this book is it is really, really chock full of statistics and data that would really speak to the folks that are making decisions about where should they focus when they are working to reach these people. Now, if I have another kind of content question, if I were wanting to reach the rural voter,
Mhm.
let's say in northern Michigan,
Mhm.
is there a place where they congregate that I could reach them and get to them so that, or how do we pull them together? I think one of the challenges might be it's just easier to go to a college campus because you got 50,000 students like right there. How do you reach this constituency in, they are very far apart and they're not like all concentrated like on a campus.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts along those lines?
So what I would say on that is, one, I don't know
Mhm.
exactly. Having said that, in today's age, I think all you have to do is show up someplace, and then social media, press, and everything else gets it out for you.
Right.
So, for example, when Biden has come here, he has gone to factory. He has
Mhm.
gone to, I don't know which one, but he'll go
Mhm.
to a Flint or Atlanta or
Right.
maybe a Lansing, Grand Rapids. These are all cities,
Right.
which is fine.
Yes.
Go to all the cities you want. That's important. But he doesn't go to rural areas.
Mhm.
He doesn't show up um, in a little tiny town or somebody's farm and tell them how important they are.
Okay.
Because yeah, you're only going to reach 100 people at that visit, well, president, obviously, but I think this would be a lot of surrogates should be
Right.
doing like a Pete Buttigieg. He
Yeah.
should be all over the state,
Right.
right? Or his husband,
Yeah. Right.
right? And where where is he? And
Mhm.
maybe this is not his thing. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but
Right.
uh,
But it's an
but you
example.
know,
He's a local.
he's a local person, right? And so there are like local events that I think you could go to, and I think
And then leverage it
and
through
then
social.
leverage
Mhm.
it through social media, right?
Excellent. Very good point. I think you're right about that. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me
You're welcome.
today. The other thing I want to ask you
Mhm.
is I love to find out what you like about Cadillac, what you love about Wexford County, what you love about Boone. What comes to mind when you think about, this is Cadillac simply the best or Wexford County simply the best? Can you tell us what you would say your favorite would be?
Well, so I would say that I love the people, and I would say that I love the practicality and the ease that we all have with each other.
Yeah.
It's very different being in an urban setting. I didn't realize how much I missed that,
Mm.
and coming back, it's been very good for me to be back in this environment. It's very comfortable, and people are smart and thoughtful and far more liberal than they used to be. I mean, they're kind of where I would hope they would be, and,
Mhm.
and it's where I am.
Right.
I mean, I would say on a scale of liberal or conservative, I'm right in the middle, and I think my neighbors are too,
Mm.
and that's very nice. I think the parties have drifted
Apart.
apart, right?
But the
But we're all
people,
still here.
but we're still together.
We're right here, right?
Right.
Right.
That's awesome. I agree with you 100%. The people are just really what makes it all happen. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Cadillac Simply the Best. Thanks again, Mark, and
You're welcome.
we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Nice job.